Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and you know what? The Dark attribute has had it too good for too long. Despite the set being called Power of the Elements, it feels like any time we branch away from the norm, Dark weasels itself back in. We could have had a fire theme, but splites ruined that. TR elements feel like a water theme, but there's only one of them. But now, the most reliable and understated of attributes gets its time in the sun. Following a series of Fey folk and the animals they've chosen to help maintain the natural order, Vernalizer Fairies are here to give Earth decks from across the game's history what they deserve: generic support. So, without further ado, let's find some furry friends we can foster, find out which of these plays are in season, then see what archetypes are most deserving of these blessings of the Earth. It's time to test the viability of Vernalizer. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our duel runners. Our next stop is 30k, where we'll have Jack Atlas Explained, which includes Resonators, Red Dragon Archfiend, and whatever other cards were used by the Master of Fosta. We've also got our Discord, where people post Kalantosa when the mods are asleep. I'm also on Twitch, where you can join me for viewer duels and progression pools, and don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which explained videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So what's the deal with Vernalizers? Well, they're a series of Earth attribute fairy type monsters that don't really have their own game plan, but are more than willing to help others on their path to victory, so long as they too are of the Earth attribute. All the main deck monsters have an effect in hand where you can discard them alongside any monster or a Vernalizer Fairy card, which would include our spell and trap support, to gain some kind of benefit, followed by a non-targeting special summon of any Earth monster in our grave, but by doing so, we can't activate monster effects for the rest of the turn except those of the Earth monster variety. They also all have another effect on the field, whether it's protecting or enhancing our on-theme monsters. As for now, I couldn't find any connection with fables or anything else to explain the name Vernalizer. This might be a blind spot in my research, so if you know anything about this, please let me know in the comments, but for now, I feel like it's supposed to be a portmanteau of verdant and fertilizer, because they're bringing a forest back to life after winter has subsided. So they're bringing back the verdant landscape by acting as a fertilizer, but not like a bunch of mulch, but by enriching the land with magic. It's a bit forced, but it's the best I got. Let's start with Vernalizer Fairy of Flowers and Fields, a level 3 monster with 600 attack and 1600 defense, and their discard effect lets you add an earth monster from your grave to your hand, followed by the special summon. And while Flowers and Fields is on the field, your opponent can't target your Vernalizer Fairy monsters with card effects. Now, in our theme, Rabbit here can help reset our other Vernalizers in hand effects, but there's much more we can do with it. The level 8 Megaliths, for instance, need to be in our hand if we want to use their ritual summoning effects, and you sure can't special summon Ancient Gear Golem, so putting it back in your hand is the next best thing. And if Pendulum Earth monsters like Deskbots or Cleese end up in the grave, this is a great way to get them back in hand so you can set up your scales and hop to it. Vernalizer Fairy of Mountains and Melting Snow is a level 3 monster with 1100 attack and 0 defense, and their discard effect has you drawing a card before special summoning. Important note, while Flowers and Fields needs an Earth engrave to activate, Mountains and Melting Snow has no such compunctions because all the initial effect does is draw a card. And because the revival doesn't target, you can summon the Earth you discarded, if it was an Earth monster, or the Little Mountain Bear, especially if you want their on-field effect, which gives one of your Vernalizer Fairy monsters a double attack during each battle phase that turn. Now, none of our monsters have attack stats that can make the most of this, but just you wait, we'll have a good reason to utilize that effect in a bit. You'll just have to bear with me. Vernalizer Fairy of Forests and Awakening is a level 4 monster with 900 attack and 1800 defense, and their discard effect has you sending an earth monster that can be normal or special summoned from your deck to the grave, followed by the special summon effect. I presume that restriction is there purely so we don't bin Grand Soil, then pick it back up with Flowers and Fields. Or heck, it might even be to stop you from sending Block Dragon to the grave if it ever comes off the FNL list. This is also the only Vernalizer that has a twist to its special summon effect, saying that you have to special summon a monster with a different name than what you sent to the grave. That way it's not just special summoning from the deck with extra steps. And while on the field, Forests and Awakening can target one of your Vernalizer Fairies and double its current attack until the end of the turn. This can make some of our Vernalizers a decent bruiser, but remember, there's more in store. Now, like I alluded to earlier, when combined with Forests and Fields, you can end up searching any normal summonable Earth monster, but we've also got a lot of monsters that would love to be Foolish Burialed. In Fossils, sending Weathering Soldier will net you a Fossil Fusion card, and Flint Cragger can recycle one of your Fossil Fusion cards by putting it back into your grave if you've already got a Fossil Fusion in grave, and later on, you can use one of your revival effects to summon Flint Cragger, which sends one of your Fossil Fusion monsters from your extra deck to the grave. I guess Shell Knight works too if you have a rock level 8 you want to search that you don't mind waiting a turn to use. And sending Gem Knight Lazuli can grab you back a normal monster, which could be used for plays in that archetype, or could just further fuel your Vernalizer discards. And I hear Token Collector is pretty popular this format. You might want to think about binning that one as well. When going up against Sword Soul and Adventure, you'll be glad this card was around to turn off their best plays. You'll literally be saved by the bell. Vernalizer Fairy of Hills and Blooms is a level 4 monster with 200 attack and 2000 defense, and their discard effect has you adding a Vernalizer Fairy card from your deck to your hand, followed by the special summon. And while on the field, your Vernalizer Fairy monsters can't be destroyed by card effects. So if you can get the rabbit on board at the same time, you'll have a veritable field of Magispectors. Hills and Blooms also gives you access to your entire theme, so you can turn them into the Draw, Foolish, or Monster Reincarnation while still summoning any Earth monster from your grave. It's incredible. Truly, this Vernalizer is the king of the hill. And Bloom. Okay, that's all of our monsters. Now it's time for the spells and traps, and this one is what really makes this a wild support theme. Flower Crown of the Vernalizer Fairy is a continuous spell that treats all of your Earth monsters you control as Vernalizer Fairy monsters. That's right, much like how these fairies have inducted animals to join their ranks, you can bring every Earth monster into the fold, granting them the targeting and effect destruction protection, while also making them valid targets for the double attack and the attack doubler. And if that wasn't enough, this card also makes it so, once per turn, when you would activate the discard effect of your Vernalizer Fairies, you don't need to discard the second card. It only needs to discard itself. It's an absolutely incredible card that opens up the door to all kinds of decks. It truly is the theme's crowning achievement. Calendar Rotation of the Vernalizer Fairy is a normal trap that targets a Vernalizer Fairy monster in your grave and either adds it to your hand or special summons it, so you can choose whichever one gets you the effect you need. And during your opponent's turn, if you have no cards in your hand, and except during the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can banish this card from your grave to special summon as many Vernalizer Fairies with different names as possible from your grave, but return them to your hand during the end phase. This makes for a pretty good blocking effect, as you can throw out a bunch of Vernalizers to take the hits, then any survivors get bounced to your hand to use their effects on your turn. But what gets me the most about this card? The lore implications. Who's that giving that golden almanac to Vernalizer Fairy of Forests and Awakening? Why, that's Weather Painter Snow, which means Weather Painters and Vernalizers are all in the same world. It's a shame the themes don't share any kind of synergy, but it's good to know what the reason for the season change is. Our last card is Vernalizer Fairy and Flower Buds, a normal trap that targets face-up cards your opponent controls up to the number of Earth monsters you control that were special summoned from the grave. On resolution, you return Earth monsters you control in general to your hand, equal to the number of targeted cards, and if you do, return the targeted cards to the hand. This is a very contrived removal effect, but I'll try to break it down as best I can. The upper ceiling on this is determined by how many revived Earths you have, so while it's by no means exclusive, it's usually going to be tied to how many monsters you've brought back via your Vernalizers. Then, your opponent has the opportunity to respond, chaining forbidden droplets and the like, and on resolution, you pick up a number of Earths you control equal to what you targeted, but not necessarily Earths you revived. You can pick up any Earths you control, and then your opponent can pick up all the targeted cards that can be returned to the hand. It's a lot. There's so much to keep track of, especially for a card that targets and only hits face-up cards. It resets any on-field Vernalizers so you can use their discard effects, but despite all the yummy food they've got here, this is definitely an RSVP, which in this situation stands for really suboptimal Vernalizer play. So that's all the Vernalizer cards, but what do we do with them? Well, normally we try to see what themes and tech cards we can splash into the deck we're talking about to make it better. But Vernalizer is actually supposed to be that for other decks. So we're going to start off by covering some related cards before we rapid fire a bunch of Earth themes that you might want to try with a bit of a revernalized spin. World Soul Carbon and Thrawn the Disciplined Angel are both cards that haven't really had a home since their release. Both support Earth Fairies, and currently the TCG only has 44 of them. Many of them are standalone monsters, with only 2 archetypes that have a significantly Earth Fairy representation. However, Fluffle is tied with the Dark Frightfur and Edge Imps, not to mention Fluffles have their own waters as well. And while Madolches do have a lot of Earth Fairies, they don't really benefit from what either of these cards do. However, Carbon can be attributed to search any of your Vernalizer Fairies, and Thrawn can act as a free special summon from hand whenever you discard your Vernalizers to help with extending your plays. Another Earth Fairy that might catch your eye is Cataclysmic Crusted... I'm just imagining Calcifida is like, oh, you having trouble, man? You having trouble saying the name, huh? Not as good at this whole voiceover thing as you think you are, huh? Calcifida. Another Earth Fairy that might catch your eye is Cataclysmic Crusted Calcifida. Forests and Awakening might have some scruples about sending monsters to the grave that can't be normal summoned or set, but this round boy certainly doesn't. The recently released Asa the Earth Channeler is also a fantastic pick. If you discard a Vernalizer for its effect, you can search any other Vernalizer monster, which makes it a bit less flexible than Hills and Blooms, but when mixed with another theme, Asa can help search members of those themes as well, provided their attack stats are low enough. There's also the imminent release of all the new Ishizu cards in Duelists of Pyrazine. They're all Earth Fairies and care about having other Earth Fairies, and while the deck is set to have quite a few tricks up its sleeve, it can certainly use all the help it can get. But what about the themes that could really use a boost from Vernalizers? Well, some that fit the aesthetic would be all the level 2 beasts in the game, including Melfies. You can set up your grave with forests to get them back with Pony, or just revive any Melfie that hit the grave for whatever reason to get your grind game back online. I'd love to add mystical beasts on top of this as they work well with Melfies, but Kalantosa only works when summoned by a beast monster's effect, so use with caution. Amazonas could use the extra push as well. While their fusions do provide excellent protection, they don't do so for themselves, but by putting some Vernalizers on board plus Flower Crown, they can benefit from those protections as well. Plus, I gotta say, the Flower Crowns would look great with their aesthetic. Madolche has got to be one of my favorite themes to pair with them, because they're another way to get Hootcake onto the board without using your normal summon, while giving you grave fodder to activate their effect. And if you use Mountains, then you get actual legit card draw in Madolche! Can you believe it? Earth Machine ain't looking too bad either. Forests and Awakening can bin Trencher or Tunneler for their superb grave effects, and Flowers and Fields can add Ancient Gear Box from your grave to your hand, triggering its search, all while summoning any Earth Machines in your grave to help build up your board. Good targets include, but are not limited to, Metal Cruncher, which gets you another search, or Citadel. Even though they can't be sent to the grave by Forest, nothing's stopping you from reviving it with your card effects. Don't worry, Machina is chock full of ways to get to this absolute peak of engineering. You just enjoy having another way to revive it outside of its own effect. And, funnily enough, if you have Flower Crown on board alongside Hills, which keeps all your Vernalizers from being destroyed by any card effect, you can use Citadel's board wipe or overdrive without losing your own monster while you gain all the benefits. And are you really gonna pass up the opportunity to summon one of your giant Xyz trains, then doubling its attack with Forests to brutalize your opponent's life points? I would go so far as to say that Vernalizers revolutionize UA, as they add another way to get them into rotation fairly easily. It even lets you run more situational UAs like Playmaker with more confidence, because you can just send it to the grave so you don't accidentally draw it, and revive it as needed. And this also goes for themes like Subterror, X-Saber, and Dino Wrestler.
Is this thing on? Hi everybody, Christian the editor here. I just wanted to make a really quick note that Nova forgot that Gothams is a card. So when I let him know that you can loop this with Vernalizers and potentially rip your opponent's entire hand away, yeah, he was a little mortified by that, so just keep that in mind. Have a good one.
In fact, if you play Vernalizer, you should probably just add a copy of Panko Crumbs to your deck list. Imagine being able to summon that monstrosity back every turn. While Naturias can benefit from Vernalizers, I think I'll just remind all of you that in an all-Earth deck, it's much easier to summon cards like Beast and Barkion, as well as honorary Naturia Synchro Goyo Guardian. And your revival effects don't say you have to revive monsters that started from your main deck, so you can bring back some truly heinous floodgate effects. Trap Tricks are all Earth, and some of them even have some stupendous special summon effects. And the more you can turbo out, the more Serras, Kularias, and Rafflesias you can field. Vernalizers lend themselves to very monster-heavy decks, so to make sure your resources keep flowing both in hand and in deck, maybe run a couple copies of Pot of Avarice. As for a silly tech pick, I'm leaning towards Ibicella lutea. One of the best benefits of running Vernalizer Fairies in your Earth deck is Flower Crown, but it's vulnerable to all kinds of removal. Thankfully, Ibicella is an Earth monster that can't be destroyed by battle if you control other monsters, which hopefully you will, is eligible to gain the targeting and effect destruction protection, and in turn keeps your opponent from targeting Flower Crown with effects so they can't pick it off so easily. Plant deck or no, you should seriously consider having a copy of Ibicella around to revive, keeping your setup safe. And that's all I have to say about Vernalizer Fairies. They have the potential to shake up the game, but they still have a long way to go. By locking yourself out of other attributes, you're losing access to some of the game's most powerful cards. Verte Anaconda, Borrelsword Dragon, Access Code Talker, Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, Dragon Lincoln General, Tri-Brigade Lyrilisk, and even Frogs. But a number of rogue decks have made do without them before, and I'm excited to see what they can do now that they have access to the power of nature. Mark your calendars, meta, because winter is coming to a close. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Do you think Vernalizers have a spring in their step, or are we in for 2 more weeks of cold unplayability? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Ashling Waltz, Nebula Navigators, Ava Goulet, Adam Zajdel, Benjamin Meisner, Biohazard 011, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, Shooting Star 3300, The Fresh Prince of Con-Air, The Wizard Moose and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Harry, the Ominous Benefactor, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion, James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Rem T. Bright, and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to see another deck that's got a lot of fairies, if not a lot of earths, check out this video I did covering heralds. And if you want to see 2 Yu-Gi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenkinai's latest series, Progression Pulls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.